Welcome back to the Samurai Joinery workshop build. To kick off episode 2, we're tackling one of the biggest jobs so far, installing the roller door. This thing was way heavier and more awkward than it looks. Definitely not a one-man job, so I had Dad give me a hand. There's not really any graceful way to do this. It's basically lift, shuffle, swear a bit, then lift again till it's finally sitting where it needs to be. Once the door was up, the next step was tensioning it. With roller doors, all the spring tension comes from rotating the door on the shaft, that pole running through the middle. You rotate the door to load the spring, lock it off, and that's what gives the door enough tension to lift smoothly instead of just slamming shut. It's one of those jobs where you really want to take your time. Too little tension and the door's useless. Too much tension and it becomes dangerous pretty quickly. But once it was finally done, it made the shed feel like a real workshop for the first time. Jobs like this definitely remind you why having an extra set of hands and a bit of experience makes all the difference. So with the shed starting to take shape, the next step was preparing timber for one of the most important pieces in the workshop, an outfeed and assembly table for the cabinet saw. I like to start by rough cutting everything to length by hand. It's quieter, more controlled, and it lets me work without firing up machines straight away, especially when I'm working early or late. At this stage, accuracy isn't the goal. I'm just breaking the timber down into manageable sizes so it's easier and safer to machine. Once everything's cut down, it's over to the joiner to start squaring things up. This is where the timber really starts to behave. Flattening one face, squaring an edge, and turning rough stock into something you can actually build from. So, all of this stock is for an outfeed and assembly table that's heavily inspired by Japanese joinery. Clean lines, solid proportions, and joinery that's doing the work, not just screws holding everything together. This table is going to be the centerpiece of the workshop. Once it's in place, everything else gets easier. Japanese joinery has always been about precision, simplicity, and respect for the material. That's the approach I'm taking with this build. When you're preparing timber properly, the order you do things in really matters. The first step is docking everything to rough length, and I always leave a little bit of extra material on each piece. The extra length gives you room to square things up later, and clean up any tear out or imperfections. Once the stock is manageable like this, the next step is squaring it. I'll generally flatten one face, then square an edge on that face on the jointer. Everything after this references off those two surfaces. With one face and one edge square, I can safely rip the timber to width. Trying to rip first without a reference edge is how you end up with twisted or inconsistent parts. After ripping, the final step is thicknessing. This brings everything down to its exact final dimension and ensures all the legs and rails match up perfectly. So the order is, rough length first, square it, rip to width, then thickness to final size. It's a simple process, but doing it in the right order makes every joint fit and every build go smoother. Get the order right and the timber does exactly what you want, not the other way around. So with some stock fully dimensioned, it was time to move on to the joinery, starting with the legs. I'm cutting castle joints here, which is where the top rails will lock into the legs. This joint does a few things at once. Structurally, it creates a mechanical lock between the rail and the leg, so the table stays rigid even without relying on fasteners. But just as importantly, it becomes a visual feature. The rails pass through the legs, and instead of hiding the joinery, it puts it right on display. Cutting these on the bandsaw lets me stay accurate while keeping the cuts controlled and repeatable. After roughing out the castle joints on the bandsaw, the next step is removing the bulk of the waste. Before going anywhere near the mortiser, I pre-drill the joint with a 10mm bit. This does two things. It removes most of the material, and it makes the next step much easier on the machine. By pre-drilling, the mortiser isn't fighting solid timber the whole time. The chisel stays cooler, the cuts are cleaner, and everything stays more accurate. It also gives you far better control over the final shape of the joint, especially in something like a castle joint where accuracy really matters. It's slower up front, but saves time and mistakes later. Once the waste is removed, it's all about refining the fit. With the legs complete, the next piece is to cut at the top rails that fit into the castle joints. These rails are joined together with half laps. Each rail is cut to half its thickness so they can sit flush where they cross. When these come together, one rail sits on top of the other, and the half laps lock them into a single solid unit. And that's how it looks with one rail slotted in. Now, to get the rails to pass through the narrower face of the leg, there's one more step. The ends of the rails need to be cut down so they can slide through the leg. It's similar to how you'd shape a bridle joint, reducing the width at the end while keeping the strength through the middle. That way, the rail can feed in through the narrower opening, but still lock into the castle joint once it's in position. When everything's sized correctly, it slips through cleanly and seats exactly where it needs to. Before everything goes together, there's a bit of chisel work to clean up the joints. It's not about removing much material, just refining the fit so everything seats properly. This is where hand tools really shine. A few careful passes makes all the difference between a joint that fights you and one that slides together cleanly. Before moving on, I add a small detail to the ends of the rails. I cut a slight angle at each end. It protects the edges from getting knocked around, but it also softens the look of the frame. Details like this show up a lot in Japanese inspired work. Nothing flashy, just small refinements that make the piece feel more considered. This is the part I always enjoy the most, seeing all the joinery come together for the first time. Every joint here is doing a job. The castle joints lock in the rails into the legs, the half laps tie the rails together, and everything supports everything else. No glue yet, just clean mechanical fits. When it goes together like this, you know the time spent on preparation was worth it. With the legs capturing the rails and the rails tying into each other, the whole frame starts to act as one solid unit. To stiffen the frame even further, I'm adding bottom rails using traditional mortise-and-tenon joints. Just like before, everything starts at the jointer. I flatten one face and square one edge. These become my reference surfaces for every cut that follows. With a true face and edge established, I can safely rip the rails to width on the cabinet saw. This keeps every rail consistent, which is critical when you're cutting tenons later. From there, the stock goes through the thicknesser. This brings everything down to final thickness and ensures all the bottom rails match perfectly. I start on the cabinet saw by cutting shallow grooves at the tenon shoulders. These define the exact length and depth of the tenon and give me a clean, accurate shoulder to work from. Getting these shoulder cuts right is important. They control how tight the joint closes and how clean it looks once everything's assembled. Once the shoulders are established, I move on to the bandsaw. This lets me remove the bulk of the waste quickly without stressing the timber or the blade. By combining these two machines, I get accuracy where it matters and speed where it counts. From here, it's just fine tuning the fit before the rails are ready to drop into the mortises. With the tenons cut, it's time to chop the mortises that will receive them. This is where the chisel mortiser really shines. It removes material fast, but more importantly, it does it accurately and consistently. The square chisel cuts the walls clean, while the auger in the middle clears the waste. Because the stock is already square in dimension, the mortises end up perfectly aligned and repeatable across every leg. Before any glue goes on, I do one final dry fit. This is just a last check, making sure all the tenons seat properly, the joints pull up tight, and the frame stays square. If something needs adjusting, now's the time to do it. Once glue is involved, there's no going back. Everything's fitting exactly how it should, so I'll leave it there for now. In the next video, I'll glue up the frame and start bringing this outfeed and assembly table together properly. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more workshop progress.